Welcome to our Tuesday Trends Live. And today we have Ruth Winden with us to talk about labor market information and how we use that information. So today we're going to talk a little bit about trends and then dive into how we use labor market information. And then towards the end, I'm going to walk you through some of the sites that we are going to reference. So Ruth, thank you for joining me. I know that you pay attention to all of the ins and outs of the labor market in the UK.
Absolutely. And to be honest, at the moment with COVID-19, we obviously have to pay particular attention to it. And I think one point of discussion will be, there's so many things that we're not sure about, how things will develop, how do we use labor market information in the context of all the uncertainty that we're facing?
Yeah, it's so true because economic forecasts are troublesome in usual times, right? I mean, economists will joke about that it's just a prediction and nobody knows. And when we're in the middle of a changing time, particularly different than any other time we've really seen in at least the last 100 years, no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at some of this information and just kind of talk about what could we use it for.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think we're getting into the scenario planning realm now because there's so many variables. I thought about a few that we can bring up today. And we need to really work with our clients on looking at, okay, what are the potential scenarios and how do we use labor market information for those different scenarios?
Yeah, and it's interesting when I asked people on LinkedIn to kind of share their best labor market information sources with me. A lot of what I got, especially in the US, had a lot to do with layoffs. And although that's important, it's not the only information that we want to look at. So what other types of information do you see or do you share with your clients?
So I definitely go to sort of the reliable data that we have. And for me, it's always the big picture, isn't it? So there are trends and trends can change. And I think that's one of the challenges at the moment that, for instance, let's take manufacturing. Manufacturing is down in the UK, but then there's a lot of talk about after COVID that the UK has to become much more independent in terms of their own manufacturing, because I think we've all realized, that the global trade, we can't rely on buying goods whenever we need them and they arrive to the standards that we recover. I think every country has found that in COVID-19. And so there's a lot of debate in the UK, despite manufacturing going down in the longer term, we need to rebuild the manufacturing base. So if we now just took the trends that we see on the actual labor market information, people would say, manufacturing is not a career move for me anymore. And I get that knee-jerk reaction from clients. Of course, they're really, really worried. They look at the big headlines and then they panic and think, my God, my complete industry is going under. And I think we need to, as career professionals, look at really in a very differentiated, nuanced way. Okay, they're the big trends. And then I go to where's more up-to-date information. And we have some of those resources today, haven't we? Also business websites that give us, real data on who's hiring, which companies are laying off, what's happening, what do we see. And then for me, it's a lot about really looking at every client's context. It's very different whether you can say, I have a year's savings and I can wait a little bit and I love my industry. I don't really want to leave it. And maybe we can find something else in that industry versus people who are really in dire straits and they need to move really fast. So
yeah, that's important to think about, the short term versus the long term. And as you're saying, there's longer term economic discussions going on about rehoming manufacturing to many countries and growing local food. And, as you think about the industries that you might be interested in today, those we might look at kind of the recovery trends, the nearer term, and then thinking about where you might want to be in the future, in the next year. What does it look like when the next recession happens in 10 years? Those are going to be a different conversation.
Exactly. And it's a lot about, future-proofing your career. I don't just want to look at the trends in terms of the data, from industries. It's also about what skills are in demand, what do you need to prepare for in the long term. And one thing I'm really encouraged by is I think all over the world, we're seeing such a demand for home working, remote working, and that of course, you can't do every job from home, but I think the revolution in home, distance working gives a lot of new opportunities also for people who might not have had opportunities before because they've been, they live in a remote area, for instance. So there's so many different facets. It's really fascinating, but I think we need to be very open with our clients, but also steer them through, all the scenarios and the possibilities, so that at the end, my clients and I feel like we've made a really sound, informed choice, and we're not just going for the big headlines. So that's, I think, the challenge that we have as career professionals.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I noticed too, is that especially in the US articles, so I was searching for other resources of data market information that might be newer, fresher, or more insightful than just the Bureau of Labor Statistics, where you really have to dig. And I know a lot of career professionals, we don't have time to dig, and our clients may not either, or may not know how, et cetera. So I thought, where can I find some, other resources? And a lot of the resources in the US, the big headline is always, this many jobs lost, and kind of the gloom and doom. And although that's good for people to know, it's not necessarily helpful, right? What we want to know is, what are the trends in terms of resources and industries, and as you were just saying, kind of the long term, what's coming back and what might not come back. So I just wanted to share this resource that you found.
Is that the CIPD one?
Yeah. Well,
no, yeah.
It's the how to use labor information, the UMI careers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the University of Cambridge, the careers team there, they put up a really good blog on how to use labor market information. And I think it's, it's that being nuanced and not just using the data for the sake of the data, but what to actually do with the data. And I think that's where we come in as career professionals, really helping people make sense of it, rather than, the scary thought, the generalization. And I think one thing that is really important is also to go and talk to your networks. Those of us who were in the career professions in the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, I mean, I had so many clients, companies were saying, it's complete freeze of any recruitment, no jobs out there. And then we went through the networks, and we did really our due diligence, and people did land jobs. Officially, it said complete recruitment freeze, and behind the scenes, some essential jobs were still being on offer. So but if you read recruitment freeze in a company as a job seeker, you would give up on it, because it's okay, they're not recruiting, and move on to the next company. But so we need to encourage people to go behind the headlines and also use their networks.
Yeah, and what I liked about this blog specifically is that it talks about those bigger picture, like it talks about McKinsey and Company, their shortlist newsletter that gives trends, but then also the Economist podcast, and thinking more about those long-term trends, not just what's happening here in the short term. So that's why I like this article, is because it kind of balanced those right now. If I'm unemployed, what should I do right now, versus where should I look even in the next year or the next 2 years, because we know that there's going to be a lot more change, and we can't just focus on right now. So that's what I liked about that blog, was the both, here's some resources for the right now, which we're going to share a few more, and then here are some things to think about longer term.
Yeah, and I must be very clear, this is actually from colleagues in the CDI who, because we do a lot of research together, and some of my colleagues this afternoon came and gave me that resource. So I can't even claim that I found it, but I'm a Cambridge graduate, so I get the newsletters as well. So, it's good to see what I thought was made sense, but also then from my colleagues in the CDI here in the UK.
Yes. And I have some things that I'll share here in a little bit that were shared by people on LinkedIn when I said, what are you looking at in terms of labor market information? So we've got a whole bunch of labor market information. I could share some of that, but what other ways can people use it? You said, looking at trends in terms of industries and what might come back. What other ways are people using this information right now?
So I think people also use it, obviously for information in terms of salary information, because we need to be clear, where the salaries are going. I mean, obviously, with COVID-19, we have a complete freeze. Actually, quite a few organizations have avoided redundancies because they said, okay, everyone has to take a 20% pay cut, so there are different ways to deal with that. So certainly salary information, but also, in terms of skills requirements. And then I think it's really important not to forget, it's the same in the US and in other countries. A lot of we don't have to just look at an industry, but also, different regions in a country and also different subparts of an industry, So it's digging, and really not just looking at the headlines, but looking at the very nuanced picture. And that's certainly something I think that is required. It takes time, but I think it's time really well spent.
Yeah, and those more kind of near-term resources, I'm going to just share this one on salary. So this is US data, EMSI, and I'll put the link down in there.
Yeah.
I've got some blogs on what's going on in wages right now, because you do hear, oh, wages are being suppressed, but that's going to be industry dependent and job dependent, just like job loss is industry dependent, region dependent, as you were saying. So it's important for people to do that research and to know why they're doing that research. Like if you're looking to see if salaries are going down right now, what are you going to use that data for? Or is it just something that, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, well, you're searching for data or looking for some reason to switch when maybe it doesn't make sense. Like you were saying, get out of manufacturing right now. Does that make sense long term when a lot of countries are talking about bringing manufacturing back?
Yeah.
Could you do in the meantime that would create a bridge back to manufacturing if that's where your expertise is and where you're more likely to get paid well because that's where your expertise is.
And then I would use that information to see, okay, where if I cannot find any opportunities in manufacturing in my region, and I've decided, okay, maybe not for the next 18 months, but what can you do then that makes you stay very close so that, the transition back into manufacturing, is easier than in 18 months time, or, what can you use in terms of learning, or what can you add in terms of, in the UK, we discuss AI. What is not affected by AI? A lot of my clients teach themselves these things or do MOOCs, because they just realize that will make them stand out. And I'm also quite, this might be a bit daring, but I'm anti-cyclical. So I think, okay, I'll give you an example. We're facing Brexit in the UK, and suddenly a lot of people say, well, it doesn't make any sense to study languages, for instance. And I say the complete opposite. So you have a lot of parents who now pressurize their children not to study languages because they say, well, Brexit won't be relevant. And I said, this is exactly the time when you have to do it, because everyone's moving out of it. Because we'll still need people with language skills even when we have had Brexit. So I'm saying now is the time to do it, because everyone is going out. There will be such a shortage of people who have foreign language skills, so go in, and, so I think quite, maybe a maverick approach, but I think, always following what everyone else does is actually not in our interest and our clients' interest.
Well, and I always got frustrated with the labor market information, because people would say, oh, what types of careers do you want to go into? And let's go see if that's growing. And our labor data is slow. It's usually 2 years behind.
Yeah.
So you're going to look at data that's 2 years old to see if that's something that you should go into. Yes, that may be one data point, but I care more, how does it match with your skills? What is that flexibility? What skills does it give you that could create flexibility? And where does it lead you longer term in a way that is aligned with bigger global trends? Because that point in time, labor data is not going to be the only data point that we want to select. So yeah, thinking about bigger trends and anti-trends, right? For every trend, there's an anti-trend. So when someone is saying, oh, we're all moving away from languages, you could go out and look for that anti-trend of where might someone need that skill.
Yeah, and I think especially with COVID-19, I was thinking about it again today. If they find a vaccine, the world, let's say in the next 12 months, the world will be, and the economy will react very, very differently from if we'll never find a vaccine. It's about people's confidence. It's interesting, I watched a lot of the clips in America, where people are mixing and mingling. You might wonder, wow, is there really a pandemic, because people are out there and they're going to restaurants, and, I thought, wow, I couldn't believe it, to be honest, So are people confident to do this, whatever we might think of it, or are they we have a lot of discussions in the UK where we think people will actually not go out. So, consumerism will not start so quickly again. So, these are all different scenarios. And I think, I'm really quite fascinated by looking at the different scenarios and then coming up with strategies with my clients so that, okay, have plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, And also, we have a lot of conversations in the UK about people saying, okay, I've had time out now, and it actually gave me time to think. And I realized I actually want to change career or industry. So there is a lot of discussion about this, people moving and changing. And so, I think it's a good time to think about this. Some people might say it's a bad time to think about because, I should stay in everything that is secure. But we have these discussions all the time with career thought leaders. What is secure?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in that thought of, if you need something right now, you don't want to make a change right now because your fastest job is the one that's most aligned to what you were just doing. However, if you have that cushion, as you were saying, or if you're employed but thinking about what the long term looks like, it's always a great time to explore. If you're thinking about making a change, it may not be the time to quit your job today. No. And if you're unemployed, it may not be the time to make a change, depending on the situation, because you know that it does make your job search longer. The further away from what you've been doing, you try to change too.
And, I just really feel for people who love their jobs, who love the industries, and, and that is so hard when it's really not your choice. And so, I'm looking at, okay, how can we stay close, and really look at some options, because it's heart-wrenching, when someone has been so fulfilled in their careers and they love their industries. And it's just one of these things. It's one of the industries that's been really hard hit.
And that's challenging to help people make the transition without feeling like they have to transition a big amount, or, I'm not really fond of the reinvent word, because we are who we are, and we have that skill, and we don't really want to throw the skill out the window.
Yeah.
We want to bring the skill to our new industry, to our new role. And how can we help people do that? Build on what they have, make that transition without feeling like they're starting over.
Yeah, because some people, they can't start over, because we all know how much hard work it is, and it takes time and a lot of commitment, and some people are just not in the position to do that.
Yeah, and you had a few other things. I was just going to pull this one up here. So we've got some UK data, obviously. We have US data. We have Canadian data. We've got all kinds of data. I'll drop the links in the but this was one that you shared. It was a blog.
Yeah. I love the Azuna website. They also have these updates, they have these job alerts, and I just I think it's really going in a lot and making sure that we're all on top of it, and I like it because also they have all sorts of things behind the platform that you can use also in terms of skills, and I can only recommend have a look. And they also have, if I'm not completely wrong, but I think that's not just UK, because I thought they also had US and Australian data. So
I'll have to poke around out in there. What I noticed on their site was that they showed about the growth. And this is, we tend to look at where's unemployment happening, and those trends are good to look at. But there's also a lot of trend data out there on who isn't being laid off and where are there areas of growth. So I like that they kind of bolded that out here.
Yeah. So I think it's and it's got a really good reputation. It's very reliable, and because I think that is always a thing. So they have data on 2018, and then if you scroll down, then they have the 2020 data, and they invest a lot of energy on getting good data. There was also something from the REC, wasn't there? I don't know whether that's one, Marie, where they have a job barometer that is up to date, and because that's the thing, isn't it? As you say, so much of the information, there is a delay, and what we need is, that's one. Ideally, what's really happening in the here and now. And what I do a lot is also go, to business websites, or business news websites, which are really up to date. And we have, I mean, you have the same in the US, having either the chambers of commerce or sort of representations of organizations, and they often have really good regional information. Also, you will have the same in the US. We have these regional government bodies who provide a lot of data, and that is often really very detailed, because that's their specialism, looking at the different regions.
Yeah. And here in the US, so I found two. One under the Bureau of Labor Statistics that lists all of the state information, and our states seem to be maybe not funneling up to the national as much as I see the resources from Canada and Australia, UK. So the state data may be better for people in the US. So there's two places here, one of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'll drop this in the comments, and then one on Career InfoNet, which are the same department really within the US government, but two different ways of finding that information. And then I also found, I don't know if you'd seen this before, that Nancy Culmer suggested the Indeed hiring lab.
I read their reports, which I think are excellent. So this might be, is that where you download the reports? Because they do their own research, don't they?
Yeah, there's quite a bit here. So they've got their articles that talking about the slowdown, the decline in job postings, but then some of the job postings that are increasing or are being posted for May. So they've got good, easy, accessible data here, which I liked, and more up-to-date information there.
One thought I had was, I know that LinkedIn has been saying for a few years, that their vision is that they will do the perfect matching between, people and skills and opportunities, and I thought, yesterday, I thought, I wonder how close they are, because that's obviously data. They have so much data, haven't they? And that would obviously be data that would be really, really interesting, this matching idea. And what you showed them, Marie, is that part of the ONET?
Yeah, so that's kind of ONET, where you can go and find the different state labor information. Every state tracks their own labor data as well. But no, I was poking around in LinkedIn because someone said, with LinkedIn Premium, you can see. And the only thing I could find in LinkedIn is that they do have, obviously, their Who's Hiring article. And you can search jobs in there. And if you kind of click on the right things, you end up in this place of who's hiring right now, but it's all healthcare related. So, urgent jobs. They're all healthcare related, which is interesting. Glassdoor is one of the better ones I've seen in terms of hiring, and they show the types of industries that are trending, as well as the jobs that are right now. So lots of different ways to look at some of that.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because you could argue we're not really short of data, are we?
No. And that's why I was looking for sites where it was a little bit easier to process, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics site, and I, kind of ask people, what site should I be looking at? And it's not that easy to decipher the data. And I know that a lot of us don't have time, our clients don't have the time, or perhaps, kind of the expertise or desire to dig through this data. So this one, I think it was Susan Joyce who shared this, where it goes through the job openings, hires, and separations. But even this, it's a little bit intimidating, this huge long table. It's not bad, but it's, it's not extremely easy to wade through. And that's what I liked about some of the other ones, the Indeed. Some of the staffing sites are showing some information. So this was just an infographic from a staffing site that was showing, the different industries that are being cut down, and then actually warehouse and logistics on the rise. So some of our people in manufacturing might actually be a good fit in this warehouse and logistics world for right now, until manufacturing comes back. So there's some things there. And then you had talked about this one on rec which shows some of the trends for the UK. And I would tell people that, I'm going to put all these in the chat, and you might think, oh, that's a UK site, I'm not going to go there. But the industries that are failing and growing in the UK probably aren't worldly different than those other places around the world, right?
Yeah, and REC is a recruiter association, so I love talking to recruiters because they obviously have a really strong idea of what's happening in industries, and so and they have a really good reputation, because I think that is the thing with data, isn't it? You want to use data that you can trust.
Yeah.
And because if we use this as a basis for career decision making and job search strategies, then we really have to be confident what we're looking at is actually really concise and precise and reliable.
Yeah, and read between the lines a little bit, right?
Yeah,
If you're looking at some media, just to know that it may come from a slanted perspective, and that's not bad, as long as you're reading several different things and seeing how the data is presented. The unemployment data is always a big point of contention here in the US. How is it reported? Who's getting counted? And I would encourage people not to necessarily get bogged down in that data, because in terms of your job search, that's not as critical of data for your job search. For your job search, you're looking at what are the trends, what industries are growing, what industries are seeing larger percentages of layoff. But we don't necessarily need to dive into how is unemployment being counted to use the information for our job search.
Yeah, and I always use the data as a starting point, and we all do, don't we? And I can't stress enough with my clients, okay, what's your list of organizations, after we've done all the data and the trends and all this, and we look, we work on the target list, and who's on there, and let's use the networks and really find out. And because and it doesn't always match the trends that we see, because we mustn't also forget that whatever survey people do, it's always a selection. They can't ask everyone. So I know they're obviously all trying to be as representative as possible, but they're always outliers. So it's digging deep and using it as a starting point. But I would never suggest make a decision based on those trends that you see. And the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people who've been so hit by COVID-19, they see the headlines and they make rash decisions because they think, oh, that industry is tanking, or that, and I think that is a real tragedy, because they might make some really dramatic decisions based on a small picture, and I think, or a certain amount of information, and it's not the complete picture. And I think that's where we really have to step in and help our clients make really sound decisions.
Yeah, and always balancing. So we know that it's the fastest job search is in their existing job, in their existing industry. And if they make a change out of that based on data that's not very reliable or that is overstated, they're going to lengthen their job search. Whereas we might say, okay, so this specific piece of it is not doing well right now. Where can you make the smallest change possible if getting a job fast is the necessity? Yes. Versus if you want to make a change, that's different. That's a different conversation. Right. And I see kind of those two trending differences in the articles, people talking about, oh, you should make a career change, and people say, no, don't make a career change. And it really just depends on what that individual situation is. Yeah,
and it's much more gray than black and white, isn't it? And we need to be in the gray zone and look at the nuances, not the black and the white. Yeah, I agree.
So there are some Canadian resources as well. I've got one up on the screen that I will share. The comments are getting mad at me for putting links in there. So I just was writing to Ruth before we got on that I think this is going to warrant an article. We'll put together some kind of article, and I can gather all of these links into it. Thank you for Marie McCann shared a whole bunch of the Canadian links with me. And then, of course, we've got some Australian data as well shared by Jillian Kelly. But right kind of here as we're closing up, Ruth, I just wanted to share this one resource that Career Thought Leaders has put together for everyone with the Who's Hiring. and this is a compilation of compilations. So it's a list of lists, because I just saw so many lists going around about who was hiring. So we've got this compiled list of lists on our site. And if you think you have one that we should add, I know that Ruth, you added some that we put into this Europe section. We've got some remote jobs, Australia, Canada, thanks to Maureen and Jillian. But if you see things that you think we could add, feel free to let me know and I'll put them here. But this is a good place to send your clients, because it's compiling all of the lists into one place, instead of having to kind of search around on the internet to find them. So thank you for joining me, Ruth, and talking through how we should use this information, because we are being bombarded with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Marie.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and we're global industry, and it's lovely to share, isn't it? I mean, it's, because you can't do this all on your own, but we all read, we all research, and it's really nice to share this, for the benefit of all of us and our clients. So that's a really exciting project. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be here again next week, the same time. So we'll see you next week with another topic on trends.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.